Howdy folks, Jambareeqi here, and welcome to another one of my villain ranking videos. Today, I'm going to be doing Hanna-Barbera movie villains. To clarify, I'm talking about antagonists from theatrically released movies based on cartoons personally created by William Barbera and Joseph Hanna. So let's get ranking. Terrance from Tom and Jerry 2021. When a struggling unemployed woman called Kayla steals someone else's resume to get hired at a fancy hotel, the hotel's events manager, Terrance, becomes very suspicious of her and the cat that she recently hired to exterminate mice, Tom. I wouldn't blame folks for actually siding with this villain at first. I mean, Kayla is an unqualified fraud who is casually getting away with her lies, all while Terrance's concerns are being unfairly ignored by his dumb boss.
The mouse that caused all that destruction to our lobby is still in the hotel. I saw him in the animal tornado.
Terrance, listen to yourself.
You can also tell that Terrance really adores this hotel with a passion, and we have to admire how much love he puts into his work. Yet Terrance ends up being humiliated at every chance. However, Terrance is no angel. He's a snobby man who handles his suspicions very immaturely. You see, the hotel boss scrapes for a rubbish excuse to not background check Kayla so that the film can desperately force its story to play out, leaving Terrance to rely entirely on a gut feeling as he wastes time belittling or harassing Kayla. He's the very definition of a villain for the sake of a villain.
You better hope this little cat plan works, because if it doesn't, I'll make sure you never work in New York City again.
After being fired from his job, he could have just applied for a different hotel, but he becomes a bitter and vengeful man, and now embraces his villain role, as he cunningly uses his wits to turn Tom and Jerry against each other through some pretty clever psychology.
As you may already know, Kayla's been put in charge of the wedding, and yeah, it's a tough job. That's why she sent me here to bring you back, so you can help. But there's a catch. I can only take one of you.
All in order to utilize the cat and mouse's ongoing rivalry and cause a commotion at an upcoming celebrity wedding at the hotel.
Oh, I'm sorry!
Kayla deserves to be exposed for being a fraud, but Terrance is so consumed by vengeance that he's happy to spoil a couple's wedding just to prove how incompetent Kayla is, even though she was bound to reveal that herself.
You not only destroyed this wedding, but may have destroyed the future of this hotel.
Sure, Kayla faces repercussions for what she did, but Terrance, well, for some bizarre reason, Kayla promises to keep silent about his wrongdoing, even though his decision to put revenge before his customers shows that he's too volatile to be an events manager. However, he does kind of end up atoning for his actions in a way, because he at least gives a chance to the applicant that Kayla impersonated. Captain Kiddie from Tom and Jerry the movie. This stage entertainer is a whimsical and charismatic guy who ends up rescuing orphan Robin at sea. But once he learns about Robin's aunt's reward money for her finding, Kiddie decides to keep the little girl hostage in his fair. This captain isn't your archetypal idea of a villain. He's almost an anti-villain, because he's not inherently evil or malicious. He's a big jolly clown who is great with kids, that ends up being corrupted by the promise of riches. Heck, compared to the other villains in the film, he treats Robin the best and shows the most remorse.
Sorry, kid. Gotta keep you here till your aunt arrives to fetch you.
And I thought you were a nice man.
But I am, my dear.
You might argue that this takes away his menace as an antagonist, but on the contrary, there is something creepy about him. He's a weird, washed-up entertainer with a puppet as his only friend and conscience. Oh, and the film is strangely ambiguous about Squawk the parrot's sentience. Either Kiddie has gone mad and genuinely believes that his puppet is alive, or this stage parrot has a dark, hidden secret. Whichever explanation, there's certainly something off going on between the captain and his deranged toy.
What do you mean you're rich? You mean we're rich? Oh, yeah, I forgot.
Kiddie's actual villain plan is pretty easy to criticize though. I mean, he kidnaps a child in broad daylight at a fair that has his name on it and decides to lazily go to sleep until Robin's aunt arrives. You'd think that his puppet would scold him for such incompetence. Nitpicking aside, I'd say that Kiddie's biggest strength is his ability to use his wholesomeness as a tool of deception. This children's entertainer's whimsical charisma and carnival barker charms can help him to keep poor Robin's guard down completely, something that the far more unhinged villains can't do.
I love Ferris wheels.
You'll love this one. Let's make sure it's safe.
Oh, and Kiddie does have the best vehicle in the film's final race. Seeing as Robin is escaping on a boat, the captain has a complete advantage on water, all while his competition rivals are stuck on land.
You can navigate your way around the dam.
Dr. Applecheek from Tom and Jerry the movie. This veterinarian might seem like a wholesome fella, but he's actually an evil man who is napping pets and then selling them back for profit. In Tom and Jerry's case though, someone is paying the vet to have the cat and mouse executed. This dog doesn't look like your typical animated baddie, but that's actually something that works to his advantage. His whimsical name, cherubic face, and elderly age all lend him a hand in pulling off a kind vet persona.
Naturally.
Oh, and once he's out of character, he makes for a slightly menacing dungeon master, and can even pull off quite the scowl for someone so cute looking. Heck, this monster even carries a whip just to scare the poor animals he's napped. Sure, he's angry about Tom and Jerry freeing all of his prisoners at first, and even develops a very personal vendetta against the cat and mouse.
Nevertheless, those two animals have cost me a bundle.
But once the Mad Doctor learns of Robin's reward money, he's willing to adapt to his recent loss and embrace a brand new crime. From here on out, the mask is off, and he becomes a relentless competitor in the chase for the $1 million. Even going as far as to steal an ice cream trolley just to join the race on the road, although it's admittedly the worst villain vehicle in the competition.
You're too late, Doc!
I also find it fun how the promise of a reward switches up his relationship with his very own minions. Loyalty gets thrown out of the window, and the power dynamic becomes obsolete as the henchmen enter the race too and compete against their own boss.
Hey, Doc, get us out of here! Sorry, boys! One good turn deserves another!
In the end though, it's this very chaotic rivalry that results in Applecheek becoming a loser, leaving the greedy doctor with no prize money and no dignity. The evil masked figure. From Scooby-Doo 2, Monsters Unleashed. This ominous villain with a robotic mask is trying to ruin the reputation of Mystery Inc. by bringing their old monster enemies to life in a bid to push them into public humiliation. Once unmasked, the culprit turns out to be news reporter Heather Jasper Howe, who has been pushing anti-Mystery Inc. propaganda. But then she's unmasked, and we learn that the baddie was the vengeful Dr. Jonathan Jacobo. Look, I'm nostalgic for Scooby-Doo 2 just as much as anyone else my age, but folks, this is a pretty dang flawed villain. I will give them fair credit for being the originator of the monster-making machine scheme, sneakily planting said machine's manual in another suspect's house, and playing their personal part in the movie's overall theme of identity.
What do you do for the gang? Really? Velma's the smart one. Fred's the leader. All you are is a pretty little face.
They have a very cool design as well, with their zany hair, a unique metallic animatronic mask, plus their bellowing deep voice has one hell of a presence.
Because of you, soon Coolsville will be mine.
But this is a mystery movie, and the puzzle for our villain's identity is quite the mess. Audiences just aren't given enough to work with to play detectives themselves, and so the big twist just ends up feeling like a cop-out. The movie focuses so much on desperately misleading audiences into suspecting the red herrings that there ends up being limited good clues for the actual culprits. Sure, the groundwork for Heather and Jacobo possibly being behind the mask is laid out.
It's my job to unmask those who pretend to be who they're not.
Unmask those? You sound like...
But there are zero clues for Heather being an old mad scientist under a rubber mask, or a cameraman being her body double to avoid suspicion. Oh, and the clue that Jacobo is still alive after being reported dead? Well, that doesn't even get explained until the actual unmasking.
Photo. Taken of Jacobo in front of the Coulsonian. Jacobo supposedly died a year before construction even began.
You can't be all smug about having a double twist if you're going to insultingly refuse to give audiences a chance to later buy said reveal. When you think about it too, the evil masked figure is basically an unoriginal rehash of the first movie's antagonist, an old Scooby-Doo enemy with a personal grudge against Mystery Inc., who wears an animatronic disguise and works with a monster army to get back at our heroes. Heck, Jacobo even cheaply reuses Scrappy's pretending to be attacked by one of the monsters trick. So I can't even say that the franchise was trying something new. Dick Dastardly from Scoob. Dick is a villain on a mission to dognap Scooby-Doo so that he can use him as a key to a mystical portal and rescue his beloved trapped dog, Muttley. This is a very vaudevillian villain from the golden age of Hanna-Barbera that's been given a modern update for 2020's audiences. While his voice is no longer raspy and sounds even posher now,
Dick with a D. Rick with a D. dick.
Scoob is still kind of accurate to his campy charms and mustache-twiddling crookedness, while also being willing to make him a slightly darker kids show villain for this day and age.
Let this be a lesson to all. If you're going to be a snivelling suckface, you're going to look the part.
Unfortunately, his use in the film itself leaves a lot to be desired. To begin with, he's not exactly a good antagonist for a Scooby mystery, because our hero's investigation into his crime is full of conveniences. From Velma finding most info on him via a quick Google search, to the gang stumbling into a room that hands them all of the rest of the clues that they need.
Alexander the Great and Peritas conquered the world and built the gates to protect their enormous treasure. That's where the lock comes in. Only Alexander or Peritas can unlock it.
Yes, he's very good at pulling off traditional Scooby-Doo rubber costumes, and will use cartoon logic to act out each disguise perfectly.
Dastardly? We can't let that happen. Exactly. Now take me to Scooby-Doo.
Plus, he does show a knack for strategy when sending a fake tip to one of our supporting heroes. The problem is that he's mainly going after the simple-minded characters, so it's hard for me to be impressed by a lot of his devious tricks or clever chess moves when most of his victims have the IQ of someone who mentally peaked at high school.
I got a DM from one of my fans who gave me the location.
Ryan, those are a lot of words no one your age should be using.
I think the biggest detriment to this Dig Dastardly though is the fact that he's missing his iconic sidekick, Muttley. As cute as it is that our villain's motive is based on a grief for his doggy, this direction means that Dastardly is lacking the laurel to his Hardy. Without Muttley, there's a distracting empty space next to Dastardly that doesn't get filled until the villain and pup reunite at the very end.
Oh, I can't stay mad! You're alive!
The Chizzling brothers. From Hey There, It's Yogi Bear. Sniffly and Grifter are greedy siblings who run a struggling circus together and are in a lot of financial trouble. However, their bad luck changes when they discover Cindy Bear's tightrope talent and decide to capture her for their next big $1 million circus act. These brothers are an early example of the bumbling dimwit and streetwise sleazeball dynamic, a formula that had been perfected in Disney's 101 Dalmatians a few years earlier. Sure, these two are no Horace and Jasper, Disney baddies who left an impression on audiences by being shockingly dark antagonists who could also make us laugh.
Now you've been and gone and done it. You've cut me to the quick, lady. Why, I wouldn't stay here if you asked me to.
But the Chizzlings are still a perfectly fine take on the same trope. Kids are bound to especially despise the duo's cruel treatment of Cindy Bear, and how they've trained their dog to traumatize poor Cindy into performing. All while the villains themselves care more about how to share their profits as brothers than the well-being of the star that they're exploiting. At the same time, even though the duo are following a specific formula, I'd still say that they can be cunning villains with an eye for business. From Sniffly pitching the next best step for the circus's growth.
With one bear, we're cleaning up. If we had two bears, we'd make twice as much.
To Grifter using his ringmaster charisma to trick the heroic Yogi into joining Cindy.
I gotta admit, you're pretty smart. Smarter than the average bear. Hey!
Two villain tactics that happen to go hand in hand together.
Two bears, twice as much money. Hey, that's my idea. Shut up.
Although, despite my praise for their skills, I have to say that hiding the cage key under Sniffly's hat wasn't their brightest move. Surely the brothers are now successful enough to afford a save. Some folks might be eagerly quick to accuse their minion, Mugger, of being a Motley clone, but surprisingly, Mugger was the one that came first. So in a way, this hedgehog was the blueprint for Motley. Keep in mind though, Hey There, It's Yogi Bear isn't a traditional 3-act movie, so don't expect these villains to stick around for long, but they still make for decent and somewhat fun adventure hurdles. Cliff Vandercave from the Flintstones. Cliff is a smarmy quarry executive who holds a test for all of his employees and announces that the highest scored person will be promoted. After Barney ends up making a switch, Fred is the one who gets the high position job. However, Mr. Flintstone is actually a stooge for Cliff's fraud conspiracy. Cliff is a bit of a mixed bag. I mean, he's fantastic at buttering up Fred with fancy buzzwords and fake compliments.
We interface Flintstone. We strategize, analyze, conceptualize, prioritize.
Oh, and whenever Fred does become suspicious, Cliff is skilled at pandering to him, while also making sure that his stooge is being incriminated at the same time.
Ooh, pricey.
Be sure to put that on your expense account.
It's just that it's really difficult for me to completely gush over Cliff's villainy when it's not that exciting in execution. You see, a lot of Cliff's scheme is based on pure luck, because the test winner was conveniently a complete idiot. Sure, Fred can be skeptical at times, but it doesn't take much to cool his nerves or sway him from investigating the fishy clues. So we end up with a villain scheme that goes so dang smoothly that it's kind of boring to see play out, because we're mainly just watching Cliff sitting around his office, or Fred gullibly signing yet another tablet, with things only getting colourful or dramatic when we cut to Fred living the high life.
Get me a clean spoon.
It does it.
By the time that Fred clocks in that he's being tricked, it's so late into the game that Cliff doesn't even have to worry about being exposed. The crook is downright cocky even.
I'm innocent.
Oh, boo-hoo-hoo.
Once Wilma and Betty discover the truth and threaten to out the villain with Fred's Dictabird, Cliff finally starts being a more dangerous and engaging baddie. He not only makes things extremely personal by holding our hero's kids as hostages, but even when the Dictabird is returned to Cliff, he still goes ahead and sends the children to slaughterhouse devs just for the fun of it? Yeesh! What's just as dark is Cliff's rather disturbing villain death. The man is suffocated alive in the first ever use of concrete. That is so dang messed up. Cosmo Spacely from Jetsons the movie. When Mr. Spacely builds a new sprockets factory that'll produce cheap products at a fast rate, he sends the bumbling George Jetson to be the building's newest vice president. Unfortunately for George though, this factory keeps glitching out and George is being forced to endanger himself to keep production going. Cosmo Spacely is the epitome of the corrupt businessman. He doesn't have any passion for sprockets and doesn't even care if his products are good quality. He just wants to see graph charts rise and indulge in board members praising him.
Soon we will produce our 1 millionth Spacely sprocket in outer space.
Spacely, Spacely, Spacely.
He is a stubby little fella, but physical intimidation is not his forte. His authority comes entirely from being George's boss, with the legendary Mel Blanc's bellowing voice adding a punchy weight to our villain's hierarchy over the film's hero.
Jetson! You, here, now!
Cosmo doesn't see Mr. Jetson as a labour worker, but rather an expendable sacrifice that could be thrown to the lions. Sure, Mr. Spacely is happy to make George feel special for his new promotion, but only to get him to be less suspicious of his boss's intentions.
Vice President? Pack? Go?
Ah, how quickly you grasp things.
Cosmo will still show a rather fury against George every time that the factory malfunctions.
Lost time means lost money. And lost money means lost vice president. Get it?
You'd think that Mr. Spacely would be putting his money towards something, but he's actually, like any typical greedy CEO, hoarding every single penny he's made, going as far as to choose the cheapest flight to the factory possible just so that he can hold tightly onto the empire of wealth that is built from shoddy overproduction and overworked employees.
Is everything all right back here?
Oh, what a way to fly.
When Cosmo finally arrives at the factory, his bad temper and obsessive need to increase revenue reaches pure insanity. Not only does he demand for 24/7 factory operation, but he also impulsively shuts down a robot worker just for refusing to follow his bonkers orders.
There, that's better. Nobody pushes Spacely.
We do eventually learn the root of the glitches. It's revealed that Spacely's factory has been built over the home of innocent creatures called the Grungies, who have been sabotaging Space's machinery to protect themselves, resulting in a very out-of-nowhere environmental theme that feels very tacked on.
No job is worth destroying the lives of innocent creatures. See for yourself.
However, I do appreciate that Mr. Spacely doesn't suddenly have a forced change of heart at the last minute. No, he stays completely an evil character and only sheds a tear when his profit is threatened. Plus the Jetsons have to reach a compromise to settle things against him.
They run the plant, sell you the sprockets at a fair price.
Fair?
The Green Goose from The Man Called Flintstone. When Fred Flintstone takes on the identity of super spy Rock Slag, he's handed the mission of meeting up with femme fatale Tanya, who is offering to expose the secret location of supervillain the Green Goose. However, it all turns out to be a trap for Fred. Most of the Secret Agent movie is padded out with filler, and our villain spends a majority of the film off-screen. Saying that though, his threat as a dangerous evildoer is still felt throughout the whole movie, all thanks to how characters hype up his legend and his apocalyptic ambitions.
Hey, I got a family to think of. Pebble's future.
If we don't stop the Green Goose, Pebbles won't have a future.
And when we do finally meet the Green Goose, the wait does end up being kind of worth it. He's like a cross between a comic book baddie and a James Bond megalomaniac, combining the campiness of a Marvel tyrant with the classiness of a 007 rogue, all while still fitting perfectly into the Flintstones world.
Never mind him. I'm going to fire the missile. Come on.
Aesthetically, he's a delight as well. There's fashion and flavour to his entire presence. From his terrific Goose-inspired supervillain suit to actor Paul Frees's magnetic hissing voice delivery.
The fun house. I hope our guests are enjoying their last moment.
While he is an intentionally silly and flamboyant criminal, the film isn't timid about his dark side. This creep not only tries to feed our heroes with literal acid in prison, but his lair also features a macabre and twisted torture dungeon.
My lips are sealed, Goose.
Now, there is a twist to this villain, as it later turns out that he's really Triple X, Fred's own co-agent. On the one hand, I buy that a master of disguise could include a supervillain in his library of costumes. On the other hand, it's a reveal that does kind of convolute things, because if the Green Goose has been secretly working for the government, then why did he need Fred to get secrets from them?
I know your government has been working on an anti-missile missile. I want to know if they have completed it.
I don't know anything about it.
Surely he had that kind of access himself? Then again, this is the same villain who ends up getting trapped in his own missile rocket. So maybe it's not worth overthinking about his intellectual motives.
Well, that's what always happens to guys who want to take over the world.
So we're halfway through my video. Feel free to like, comment, and share. Lickboot. From Tom and Jerry the movie, this crooked lawyer is a co-conspirator in Pristine Fig's scheme to imprison a little girl called Robin in order to take the child's family inheritance, which the villain duo have agreed to split. Lickboot is maybe the most memed villain in this countdown, and it makes perfect sense why. He's a very expressive and flamboyant posh snob, with the suave voice of the always magnetic Tony J.
We've got to have money.
Internet humour aside though, I actually think that this is a decent villain. He's very much the brains of the two, all thanks to his expertise as a lawyer and ability to remain collected under stress. It's his knack for getting all the facts that keeps these villains steps ahead of Robin's escape.
You know where they're going? How do you know?
Lawyers know everything.
Plus, Lickboot's rational thinking also helps him to be a voice of reason whenever Miss Fig gets carried away.
Just pray the police find her, Pristine, or we're doomed to return to the ranks of the peasantry.
While Lickboot does tend to be the bearer of bad news or harsh truths, that's not to say that he's a complete pessimist, because there are times where he is actually the voice of hope. He's the one that comes up with the reward money idea, a tactic that very effectively expands the villain search party.
So we offer a reward for her. Someone will turn her in. Big reward, say $1 million.
But we don't have $1 million.
I know.
I also find Fig and Lickboot's relationship to be kind of unique for a villain duo. They have differing personalities, and Pristine's temper can clash with Lickboot's creepy calmness. However, they share a mutual obsessive passion for money, and it's this lust for gold that creates a weird sexual tension between the villains.
Oh, I love it when you talk like that.
In the finale, Lickboot drives a luxury sports car in the race for Robin. Sure, this vehicle is not built for the countryside, but it's a fast, speedy Austin Healey that can help the villains keep constant track of Robin. The strangest thing about Lickboot in the climax, though, is that he randomly shows concern for Robin's safety during a sudden fire. He's been totally fine with letting his partner abuse this kid, but now he cares if she's in danger? I guess it's not that strange if he has somewhere to draw the line, but it's a very out-of-nowhere change of heart, and the film doesn't even fully commit to his softer side. Then again, this entire film is a fever dream, and I will drive myself crazy if I try too hard to work out the logic behind half of what happens. Pristine Fig, from Tom and Jerry the movie. Now, this character has faced a lot of criticism for being a rip-off of Medusa from Disney's The Rescuers, because she's a red-headed diva who is keeping an orphan hostage to gain riches. However, as eerie as these similarities are, saying that Fig is a Medusa copycat and then calling it a day would be lazy analysis. She's not entirely a bad villain. While Lickboot is the brains of this villain duo, I'd say that Pristine is the brawn, a big bully who uses her large size and raspy devilish voice to push Robin around as her abusive guardian.
Gotcha, you little... Darling,
Although, I wouldn't say that brute strength and intimidation are her only skills, because despite a scary appearance, she is talented at putting on a loving auntie character, which not only helps her to keep Robin under her thumb, but also emotionally manipulates suspicious authorities.
Oh, my poor little Robin! Oh, find her, officer, please!
Pristine has a very obvious bias for canines too, because she's happy to pamper her own pet dog into obesity, but treats Tom and Jerry like house vermin, and gladly hands them over to Dr. Applecheek while knowing the vet's dark secret.
You're gonna love it here.
I will say that it's hard to credit her for a lot of things though, because Lickboot is the strategist in their scheme. To be honest, I'd say that without a lawyer, Pristine isn't the brightest bulb or wittiest baddie. I mean, Robin keeps being able to escape her clutches on a regular basis, and Fig never considers tightening security in her home, so it's no wonder Robin keeps getting away. Pristine is an attempt to replicate Medusa, right? But Medusa knew how to keep her orphan hostage from escaping too far. She chose a remote prison location in the middle of nowhere, and assigned 2 fierce alligators as guards. Fig though, well, she doesn't do anything more than just the bare minimum, and her only guard is an overweight and easily distracted dachshund.
You're the one who let her get away! I know you were eating. You're always eating.
I also find it disappointing how tame and unfulfilling her villain defeat is. This is a very evil woman who is willing to let a child die in a fire, yet she just ends up defeating herself for her own clumsiness, and faces mild humiliation at worst. Lou Strickland from Top Cat the movie. This slimy former lawyer has conned his way to the position of chief of police and plans to use his new power to take over the city through advanced technology, all while hoarding city fines in his own private safe. I do remember blasting this film in my old review of it, but you know what? I now actually say that Strickland is one of the better Hanna-Barbera film villains. Honestly, I don't think any other character in this countdown is more accurate to the real-life villains of today.
Check it out, Trixie! I got my own mouth on the money side!
The film effectively manages to make us hate this swine right from the get-go, by introducing him as an arrogant and rude twit who does not hide how awful his personality is.
Is the rest of your party here?
Huh? I am my party, nitwit! I bought the seat in front of me, the seat behind me, the one on my left, and the one on the right!
Andre's overconfident bravado, though, is a very insecure little man who has to constantly call himself handsome to every stranger.
I bet I'm the best looking VIP you ever saw, too!
A decent rivalry is developed between TC and Lou in the film as well. Not only does Strickland already have a grudge against TC for swindling him earlier in the film, but Top Cat is also the wedge between Lou and his chances of funding his robot police army.
Looks like Top Cat found a way around your technology.
No, wait!
Although it's super obvious that our villain mainly resents our hero because TC is conventionally good looking and popular, everything that Mr. Strickland desperately wants to be himself. It's this immature childlike jealousy that explains why Lou takes his fight against TC so personally.
And what do you have besides friends, a decent personality, and all your teeth?
Chief Strickland is blatantly relying on technology to overcompensate for all of his insecurities. So we're basically watching a city live in fear, all because their chief of police is a sulky man-baby who doesn't like being unpopular or not getting what he wants. I do also quite like how the film commits to this villain's techno motif too. The man crushes on technology so much that it's maybe 90% of his entire identity, whether he's projecting himself as a hologram to stay protected in public, or unfairly replacing all of his staff with cold, soulless machines, all because he overglorifies robots as flawless and perfect. Something that bites him in the butt later on, when a technical mistake is the very thing that causes his scheme to all fall apart.
Mr. Strickland, in the name of all that is honest and law-abiding, you're under arrest!
Mayor Brown from Yogi Bear. This politician has recently gotten his city in huge debt and is now desperate to remedy the situation before campaigning for governor soon. So he threatens to shut down Jellystone Park in a scheme to profit from cutting down its trees. I actually think that this villain is a pretty good parody of America's worst ever politicians. He's a very accurate satirical caricature that takes sharp jabs at political narcissists who lack basic human compassions.
Do you think I care about what the law says? Or about some endangered frog-mouthed turtle?
Brown is a mayor that sneers at the environmental importance and natural charms of wildlife parks, all because tree protection doesn't make him ka-ching and nature attractions don't match his idea of exciting.
You know, it's hard to compete with all those amusement parks.
Hey, you're not kidding. Oh, have you guys been to Lincoln Log Land yet? Oh, man. They have got a roller coaster there. It's made completely out of logs.
He'd never let the public know how superficial he is though. Heck, his entire campaign is founded on a facade that he's cunningly created, a saintly persona that he's maintained over the years through expertly staged and edited propaganda.
Alright, hurry up, people! Focus! Let's go save those orphans!
Sure, this villain isn't an active force of evil on the field, and prefers to let his minions do all the dirty work, but he really excels as a puppet master of chaos. He'll light the match through behind the scenes manipulation.
You know, maybe you could help me with that. Make sure it doesn't succeed.
Wait, so you mean like sabotage it?
And then happily watch the fire burn as a morbidly pleased spectator.
This could not have gone more perfectly. Hey, you got a little,
He never has to worry about breaking laws too, because his brown-nosing minion is a highly dedicated researcher who can find any loophole at all to benefit his boss's selfish goals.
You read the city bylaws lately?
Chapter 6, Section 73. Any municipal property that can't generate enough money to cover its operating budget can be rezoned for other uses.
I think what truly makes Mayor Brown effectively hate-worthy as a villain though, is Tim Daly's pitch-perfect take on the political grifter trope. Daly makes this baddie incredibly bungeable, all thanks to his turd-eating grin, insufferable overconfidence, and phony friendliness. It's a flawless performance that goes beyond what's on the script.
You know, I'm just so glad that these festivities are going so well, Smith. I just hope nothing goes wrong.
When Brown is exposed in the end, you can tell that it's all over for him, but he has the cheek to keep his campaign going at all costs. His reputation is now officially tanked, yet the Weasley narcissist is fully prepared to keep his sinking ship afloat.
Wait, please. That was not real. Trust me, there is no such thing as a frog-mouthed turtle.
The Spooky Island Demons from Scooby-Doo. When the Mystery Inc. gang are invited to Spooky Island, they find out that resort visitors are secretly being possessed by evil creatures that inhabit the island. These demons have been bestowed with a bounty of powers. They're super strong and wildly fast, but they also have special breath for knocking out victims or sending prey into love spells. The fact that they're rather tall and lanky for Scooby-Doo monsters also helps them to be exceptionally athletic, which is very ideal for chase scenes, a trademark for every Scooby-Doo movie. The film also does a pretty good job at building up their mystery on the island. As soon as we arrive at the theme park, it's not only established that customers are leaving acting strange, but we also learn of the legend of the local monsters, who want revenge on humans for building a theme park over their home. So when things start seeming weird to Mystery Inc., we're allowed to add 2 and 2 together ourselves and connect the dots as audience detectives. When a demon possesses a resort visitor, they do show an extreme naivety when it comes to replicating the modern youth. But it's all intentionally embarrassing, because the film is actually meant to be a satire of how corporations don't get kids today.
What up, dog? And, dog? Keeping it real.
At the same time, the demon that possesses Shaggy's crush, Mary Jane, is great at playing up a cute and innocent survivor role for the lovesick Shaggy, while also sometimes giving very strong clues for everyone else.
You stay here, I'll be right back. No, Shaggy.
I do have a couple gripes of these baddies though. Firstly, their visual effects are very much artifacts of early 2000s CGI, and the dated rendering does kind of hinder all of these monsters' menace, because they're distractingly hard to believe as live-action composites. Secondly, originally, this was actually going to be an R-rated Scooby-Doo movie that leaned much more into the horror genre. Deleted scenes actually show a much scarier take on these villains, and it's honestly sad that Warner Brothers chickened out of going this direction, because it would have made the demons way more memorable.
Uh-huh. Kind of like...
Mr. Big from Top Cat Begins. When Top Cat ends up stealing diamonds from gangster Mr. Big, the crocodile is furious with the feline. So TC tries to go into hiding, but things get personal when Big kidnaps Top Cat's bestie, Benny. Top Cat Begins puts his blood and sweat into hyping the hell out of this film before we've even seen his face. Everyone can only say his name in a scared whisper.
You? You're the ones who stole from Mr. Big.
And even the toughest of cops are terrified of taking him on.
True, it's on Mr. Big's turf.
When his face is eventually revealed, I can't say that his appearance lives up to all of this build-up. mainly because the film's bubblegum animation style kind of sanitizes a potentially scary design. However, he does have a fantastic presence as a gangster. He's a fierce criminal that's draped in luxury fashion with an arrogant sense of invincibility.
You think you can come into my nightclub and pay your way with one of my diamonds?
He tries to put on a classy front, but he has an extreme temper that might make kids jump.
Where are the rest of my diamonds?
The film also lays his evil on Fig, painting him as a no-nonsense and hyper-strict mafia don that punishes his own minions in horrible ways for the tiniest of things.
Do you know what I did to the last guy who told me we had a situation?
While he does spend most of the film in his office, he's a tactical villain behind the desk, from ordering his best minions to track down TC in the field, to announcing a big money reward for anyone who can find Top Cat, thus turning Top Cat into the #1 target for a city-sized mob. Want to know what's particularly shocking about this kid's movie baddie? When Big is tricked into thinking that he's been handed TC in a crate, he's fully willing to order his minions to shoot him to death, with every henchperson being armed with realistic gangster guns. As imposing as this gangster is, he sadly has a very underwhelming villain defeat. He's the kind of villain that would put up a stubborn, angry fight, yet after all the hype surrounding his intimidation, we end up with a whimper of a showdown. The monsters from Scooby-Doo 2 Monsters Unleashed. The monsters released upon Coolsville by the evil masked figure in this Scooby sequel are assigned with the task of collecting a control panel from our heroes, but they're also an anarchic bunch of beasts that relish in scaring humans. I think that the freshest thing about these villains is how varied they all are as a team of monsters. They're not just a bunch of Gremlins knockoffs, they're a wide eclectic mix of creatures with their very own horror novelties or fantastical powers. While I wouldn't say that the monster effects are a huge step up from the Spooky Island demons, I do like how there's a good balance of CGI, live action and puppetry to balance out any imperfections, while adding a strange eerie nature to these villains' ghostliness. There's also a personal touch to them too, because they're all based on masked baddies the mystery Inc. have faced in the past. They're basically the gang's traumatic career memories brought to real life. The team are revisiting old mysteries, except this time the gimmick costumes are actual threats, meaning that Mystery Inc. are approaching the same cases again, but there's now a supernatural danger to outsmart.
Lights out!
These monsters also play an integral part in the development of our main characters, who are already facing their own identity crises, whether we're talking about Shaggy and Scooby realizing their strengths, or Fred coming to terms with his repressed emotions as a man.
I'm not afraid. I'm a wimp, huh?
Doesn't make you a wimp.
In a way, these monsters don't just represent our hero's history, they're also very symbolic of their own insecurities.
Talking is for wimps.
Can't fool me with that macho facade.
Lastly, I appreciate how the monsters find that right balance of scary and goofy. Kids will constantly fear for our heroes' lives, and maybe even find the detailed monster designs to be grotesque. But there's still that trademark Scooby-Doo goofy humour thrown in to help slightly lighten the horror for children.
Scooby-Doo!
Chip Rockefeller from the Flintstones in Viva Rock Vegas. Chip is a wealthy casino owner who is after Wilma for her fortunes, but he has to compete against the charms of the working class Fred Flintstone. So, Mr. Rockefeller invites Fred, Wilma, and their friends to his casino, where he plans to frame Fred as a gambling addict in debt who has stolen Wilma's pearls. Chip shares quite a lot in common with Cliff Vandercave as a Flintstones villain, but even though this is the worst movie of the two, I'd say that Chip is a leagues better baddie than Cliff. A major improvement even. Like there's a far more personal rivalry between Fred and Chip. Chip isn't just trying to set up Fred as a stooge, There's also a bubbling, tense class conflict between our hero and villain, with Chip even going out of his way to make Fred feel insecure for his job.
Wilma's date works at the quarry.
Not to mention, there's a love triangle at play, and this romantic competition adds to the feud.
I'll erase your debt, Flintstone, but you've got to disappear. Out of town, out of bedrock, and never see or speak to Wilma again.
Chip isn't just lazing about during his scheme too. This is a layered and complex setup that requires many intricate steps, and Chip has to be an active player at every checkpoint of his complicated plan. One little slip up and the scheme might fall like dominoes. Yes, Chip is duping the dim-witted Fred. He isn't targeting Fred's intelligence though, but rather Fred's temptations as a struggling lower class man.
A gentleman gambler like you should be playing with the high rollers.
The high rollers?
Something that Chip can expertly exploit as an experienced casino owner who understands the psychology of gambling addiction. Oh, and Fred isn't Chip's only victim, because he also has to manipulate poor Wilma as well, someone far less gullible than the slow-brained Fred, making for a challenge that forces Chip to increase his cunning.
But just to be safe, I wish you'd let me put those beautiful pearls of yours in our safe.
Another fun layer to this villain's plan is the fact that he's under pressure to owe money to a bunch of violent gangsters. Chip isn't getting richer for superficial reasons, he's battling against the clock to keep himself from getting murdered, a tension that hangs over him throughout the whole seduction of Wilma. My only criticism of Chip is that he seems to frequently forget that he has his own security team, so it makes little sense why he lets gangsters bully him in his own casino, or sits by while Fred proposes to Wilma during the finale. Come on man, use your dang bouncers!
I can't give you diamonds, fast cars, fancy houses.
I did.
Before I reveal my number one pick, please consider subscribing to my channel for more fun animation and film related content. Thank you. Scrappy-Doo from Scooby-Doo. When Mystery Inc. are invited to a theme park called Spooky Island, they meet the park's owner, Mondavarius, who assigns them to a mystery on the island involving possessed college students. However, it's revealed that Mondavarius himself is the culprit, but what's even weirder is that he's actually a robot being piloted by Scrappy-Doo, and the real Mondavarius has been trapped in a dungeon. When Scooby-Doo was released in 2002, it was initially panned by critics, but over time, audiences have come to better appreciate it, and some folks now even credit it for being one of the more superior cartoon to live action adaptations. One such new hindsight is the realization that it has a really well executed twist villain. There's some nice subtle clues for this baddie that do deserve recognition. If you pay special attention, you can spot Mondavarius scratching himself like a puppy, almost like a dog is puppeteering him. Plus, when Mondavarius is called a suspect, he actually accepts the reasoning because it's more of a compliment for Scrappy's character acting than a sign that Mystery Inc. are onto his robot secret.
Don't take it personally. It's mostly just because you creep me out. Oh, I see. Ah.
Halfway through the film, we learn that Scrappy got too big for his boots and was kicked off the team. Oh, and this version of Scrappy isn't actually a puppy, by the way, which means the gang basically banished a grown adult who abused his colleagues and tried to overthrow everyone around him, which are major traits of a villain in the making.
Time has come that you appoint me your unquestioned leader. Either that or I'm out of here.
I especially like how this flashback is basically a very strong clue, sneakily disguised as a nostalgic story being told by Velma. That is how you do natural mystery foreshadowing, folks. Scrappy might seem unintimidating once unmasked, but the movie brilliantly compensates for this setback by giving him a huge, gigantic mutation that's actually a little scary for a kids' movie villain transformation. Sure, the CGI for Scrappyzilla isn't that much better than his demon friends, but the creepy uncanniness actually works to his advantage, and I love how the film warps his classic catchphrase into a terrific villain threat.
I'll rock you and sock you and crush you!
The Scrappy might not fit in with canon, but it is very true to the character's unpopular reputation, making him the perfect villain for a more subversive and self-aware Scooby-Doo movie. Next, feel free to check out my other villain ranking videos. There's lots to choose from. I've been Jambareeqi. Cheerio, folks.